Mr. Bean is one of the most famous comedic figures ever made. He was on TV screens all over the world for decades and made millions of people laugh with his strange behavior, awkward situations, and memorable facial expressions. People of all languages and cultures could understand the character's jokes even though he didn't say much. Behind the tight facial emotions and perfectly timed physical comedy was Rowan Atkinson, a man whose real life was a lot more complicated than the role he played. People saw Atkinson deal with personal problems, work issues, and a public life that was often misunderstood while she created comedy and chaos that didn't hurt anyone. People laughed at Mr. Bean, the man in the brown suit who didn't say much, for more than 30 years. The character became one of the most well-known in the history of TV. The real person, though, had a very different story. Rowan Atkinson stayed in plain sight for many years, letting everyone see Mr. Bean while carefully guarding his own personality and problems. A lot of information about his life and personality was never shared in interviews or magazines. For years those details remained private, but gradually the truth began to surface. On January 6, 1955, Rowan Sebastian Atkinson was born in Consett, England. Consett is a small industrial town in the north of England. He was the youngest of 4 boys, and no one in his family worked in show business. Eric Atkinson, his father, was a farmer and businessman who ran the family farm. Ella Atkinson, his mother, cared for the kids and ran the home by herself. Rowan had a pretty normal and quiet life. There was nothing in his early life that made me think he would become one of the world's most famous comics. But there was one problem that shaped his early years. Rowan had a stutter from a very young age. He had trouble talking, and letting people know what he was thinking could be frustrating and uncomfortable. For him, words that came easily to other kids were often hard to use. He sometimes felt awkward around other people because they would wait for him to finish his words. At a time when not many people knew much about speech problems, this could have been a big problem. Instead, it led to the development of his own unique brand of humor. Rowan first went to Durham Chorister School and then to St. Bees School in Cumbria. He did well in school and was especially interested in topics that required him to use logic and solve problems. He chose to study engineering instead of acting when it was time for college. He went to Newcastle University and got a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Electronic Engineering during his time there. After that, he went to the Queen's College, Oxford, to finish his studies and get a master's degree in electrical engineering. The time he spent at Oxford changed his life. He joined the Experimental Theatre Club and the Oxford University Dramatic Society while he was there. At first, he joined just to see what it was all about and to meet new people. He quickly learned, though, that he had a strange ability to make people laugh. Because it was still hard for him to talk, he naturally turned to physical comedy. Instead of using clever words, he used body language, facial expressions, and over-the-top moves to make people laugh. He met writer Richard Curtis and composer Howard Goodall at Oxford, and both of them would play important parts in his career. Together, they came up with ideas for comedy sketches and performances that would show off Rowan's skills. They were able to get jobs in radio and TV because they worked together. When Rowan Atkinson made his big break in the late 1970s, it was on the BBC comic show, Not the 9 O'Clock News. He became known to people all over the country through the humorous sketch show. His characters were usually awkward or confused people who had trouble with normal human relationships. People liked these parts because they were both wildly unrealistic and strangely believable. Atkinson was well known in Britain by the middle of the 1980s. But he and Richard Curtis wanted to make something very different from the comedies with lots of conversation they had already made. They chose to create a character whose main way of communicating would be through movements rather than words. The idea came from old-school silent movie comedians like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. The goal was to make a figure that people from any country could understand without having to translate. The figure didn't have a name at first. In early drafts, he was just called a man. Someone finally came up with the name Mr. Bean, which was strange and a little funny. The character's name was meant to be meaningless because they didn't have a clear past, job, or family history. He just lived in the present and reacted to normal events in the strangest and most confusing ways. On New Year's Day 1990, Mr. Bean made his first appearance on TV. In the first show, there was a strange man in a narrow brown suit with a white shirt and a thin red tie. He drove a small green Mini Cooper and only said a few words, like Bean a lot of the time. The show was mostly funny through visuals and not through talking. The reaction came right away and was huge. People in Britain fell in love with the character right away. The show quickly spread to other countries in Europe and then around the world. People in more than 190 countries watched Mr. Bean, which made it one of the most popular comic shows ever. After that, the character was in movies, animated shows, and even played at the opening ceremony of the 2012 London Olympics. Even though the character was a huge hit, Rowan Atkinson sometimes had trouble with how it affected his work. People around the world started to only think of him as Mr. Bean, even though he had played many other parts. In Britain, he was also well known for his roles in the historical comedy show Blackadder, which relied on smart humor and witty dialogue. But those shows weren't as well known outside of the UK. This led to a kind of typecasting. A lot of producers and fans thought Atkinson would act like Mr. Bean in real life. People who knew him often talked to him as if he were the character when they saw him in public. Scripts that were given to him often had parts that were silent or physically awkward, like Mr. Bean. He knew why this was happening, but it still annoyed him sometimes. An interesting fact is that Atkinson did not always enjoy playing Mr. Bean. For this character, you had to be very exact with your movements. Every move, expression, and action had to be timed just right. Since there wasn't much talking, the whole joke depends on how it was said. The scene would not work if a single move or attitude didn't work. When making movies, the same thing had to be done over and over again until it was perfect. Focusing hard and working hard physically were needed for this process. Atkinson was often completely worn out after long days of shooting. As he got older, the job required more and more of him emotionally and physically. Atkinson was under a lot of pressure at work, and things in his home life also changed a lot. A makeup artist he met on the set of Blackadder became his wife and they were married for many years. They got married in 1990, which was also the first year Mr. Bean was on TV. Ben and Lily were their 2 children together. For more than 20 years, the family lived a pretty quiet life, away from the public. But after 24 years of marriage, they finally got a divorce. People around the family were very upset when they heard about the split. Lily, their daughter, later talked about how hard the situation had been on her emotionally. Benjamin, their son, went in a different direction. He joined the British Army and mostly stayed out of the public eye. Atkinson started dating actor and comedian Louise Ford in later years. In the end, they had a girl together in 2017. He had to make a lot of changes and adjustments when he started a new family later in life. Atkinson kept working in movies and TV even though she was having personal problems. But he also joined public conversations about things other than entertainment. In the past few years, he wrote an opinion piece that called into question whether electric cars are better for the Earth. Using his skills in engineering, he said that making electric cars and their batteries could have a big effect on the environment. The article caused a lot of discussion. Some experts strongly disagreed with his conclusions, while others praised him for being ready to question what most people think. Atkinson was also worried about what he called cancel culture. He said that comedy needs to be able to talk about tough topics without fear of being judged. He said that sometimes being funny means testing ideas or making people feel bad. Different groups both agreed with and disagreed with what he said. During these arguments, a strange story about Mr. Bean kept going around among fans. A lot of people had noticed that the way the character was presented at the start of each episode was different. A beam of light falls from the sky and drops on Mr. Bean on the street before he starts his day. Some fans came up with a strange idea after this strange beginning: maybe Mr. Bean was really an alien. At first, the idea seemed silly, but it explained a lot about how the character behaved. It looked like Mr. Bean often didn't understand simple social rules. He looked at everyday things with interest, as if he had never seen them before. He didn't talk much and sometimes acted like he didn't fully understand how people live together. The show's creators didn't say anything about the idea for a long time. Fans kept arguing about it online and sharing their thoughts from different shows. Rowan Atkinson finally admitted that the idea wasn't totally wrong. The figure was made to feel a little strange or out of place in the world of humans. The strange beginning scene where he falls from the sky was meant to make this feeling stronger. Mr. Bean wasn't always a real alien from another world, but he was made to act like someone who was looking at human society for the first time from the outside. This point of view let the show look at everyday events from a totally different angle. Mr. Bean is still one of the most popular comedic characters in show business history. People of all ages are still finding the show and enjoying its classic humor decades after it first aired. This character shows that funny things don't always need complicated speech or cultural references. An everyday phrase, a silly mistake, or a smart physical joke can make someone laugh anywhere in the world. The person behind the character is Rowan Atkinson, a skilled performer who turned personal problems into artistic strengths. His story shows that being determined, creative, and unique can help you turn problems into chances. Even though Mr. Bean seems awkward and stupid, the mind that made him is deep in thought, smart, and dedicated to the art of comedy.